Thank you for tuning into our channel here at Erskine Parish Church. We create this and give it away so that it can be a blessing. Everything that we do here in the church relies on the generous backing of those who support us. And so if you would like to become one of them and give something back, then we've made it as easy as possible. You can go to erskineparish.com/donate, and there you can give a one-off bank transfer. You can set up a regular standing order or donate by PayPal. You can also download a gift aid form so that if you're a UK taxpayer, it increases the contributions that way as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we pray God's blessing on you.
One of the best responses I can give when my little ones say, "Can I ask you a question?" is to say, "Yep, fire away, ask away." And I can be letting myself in for perhaps a torrent of questions, and sometimes I say it a bit naively, but nonetheless, it communicates something important to them, that I have a willingness to be asked and then to also answer, or also to give out of myself. And it's easy for me to assume that posture and also to get into it because of connection, relationship. It's a bond of love, and many of us can relate to that. And it's something that we should be able to map onto God, but that we struggle to do so. And sometimes we can be reticent and draw back a bit from asking God questions because we've misunderstood the power and the bond of the love that he's shown us. Martin Luther, the German 16th century German monk and reformer, has this amazing quote where he says that faith in God is not so much about trying to overcome his reluctance, but it's more about laying hold of his willingness. It's not about trying to overcome his reluctance, which, let's be honest, quite often when we think of believing in God for things or asking him for things, it's picturing, if he would just unloose his grip, he might hear my prayer or give this to me. But it's really, if we take the picture of the Bible and what Jesus says, it's about seeing that God is full of willingness, and our faith, where it comes in, is actually laying hold of that and stepping into that. Now, a couple of passages that Callum read for us, and indeed that Heather was expounding to the kids, are amazing because, again, they show this vivid imagery of something living and growing and how it lives and grows, and the difference between something that's living and growing and something that's dead. The Jeremiah passage is written to Old Testament Israel probably about 600 BC, and they are in a real tight spot politically and as a society because they're a little kingdom. It's the kingdom of Judah it's written to, and to the south of Israel, and they've been threatened on all sides by rising empires. You've got the Assyrian Empire to one side and the Egyptian Empire to the other, and they look like they're going to be overrun. And they're asking questions of, well, what do we do in that situation? It's not unlike what you see today, the likes of Ukraine or Taiwan, which live near an absolute superpower, and they're very uncertain about their future. So that's what Old Testament Israel found themselves. And what they start to do through their leadership is go, right, let's make some deals. Let's make some preemptive deals with the likes of Assyria and Egypt, and that'll get us out of a tight spot. And they're rebuked by the prophets by that, because the prophets are basically saying, where's your faith? And not only that, but the prophets predict correctly, by the way, that doing deals with those empires is a bit like going to the, what do you call them, Wonga, the guys with the telly adverts with 3,000 APR for the short-term loan. You're going to have to pay through the nose for it, because eventually they're not going to see you as a genuine political partner. They're going to overrun you, and this is just a stepping stone to that. And where is your faith is the question that Jeremiah is asking. And in John in the New Testament, Jesus is saying, this is how you continue to grow in faith. You get it in the right place. So I want to look at first getting faith in the right location, where we actually locate it. A bit like a plant, it matters whether it's sun, whether it's shade. You've got to get it right in terms of the location. And then You've got to have some deep roots, as Heather's basically done the sermon already. You can all switch off. You've got to, and we didn't plan that before either. You've got to get deep roots, and then thirdly, you've got to look for the results. So, the confidence, placing your faith in the right place. Jesus says in verse 4, "Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." Now, it might seem obvious and pedestrian that we are to have faith directly in God, but that's not always been obvious for the church. In fact, there's always been a bit of an overlap of, well, do we believe in the church or the community of God's people, or do we believe in God himself? And how do these things relate to one another? But it's possible for us to have faith in nearly everything else. You see, we are made in the image of God, and we are made with a spirit that naturally lifts up and rises up and looks for an external source for our confidence. And that's what we're actually made to do. Continuing with the theme of kind of growing and garden, in the opening story of the Bible, we have a garden, and man and woman are placed in it, and they are placed there to have this uninterrupted access and communion, fellowship, friendship with the God of heaven. And that's what gets broken. And ever since that has been broken, we have been finding ways to place confidence in something else. In fact, that story starts to go wrong because man, rather than trusting, having faith in what God has said about his connection to him and God's goodness and God's hopes and aspirations for us, they go, actually, not sure about that. I think it's faith plus, faith in God plus. I think I need, I've got, God has said that, but maybe also he's keeping something good from us. So maybe if I reach, then maybe that'll supplement what I'm missing in my life. And that's where it starts to go wrong. But we have been having a mimetic approach to some version of that ever since, because it is possible to have our faith and, if you like, confidence. That's the word the psalmist used and Jeremiah used, those who place their confidence in the Lord. It's where is the core of the confidence of your life? Is it in God? Or, for a lot of people, it's in the bank balance or the pension or some other form of monetary security, investments, whatever. For some people, it's in family. That's where I place my ultimate confidence. And as though so many of us know, and I see it all the time pastorally, families are full of flawed and broken people and can be sorely disappointing, especially if we place all our confidence in family. It can be in our identity in our career and what we've made of it, or it can even be in ourselves. That there's a whole franchise of movies, the Westerns, the Clint Eastwoods, based on the self-made man, the Lone Ranger who is able to be a gunslinger, doesn't need anybody else. They pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. And that's obviously a caricature, but we can be fiercely independent to the point of who we really trust above everything in every situation is ourselves. I know how to get out of situations. I know how to negotiate life. And there's nothing wrong with having confidence in ourselves, but this is about the core. This is about what do you really believe in and trust in? What do you hope in when the chips are down? Is it ourselves? There's any number of places we can place it. Or we can have less of a personal faith in God, and we can go, I just have a cultural identity with the church, and my hope and my identity is there, and it's not so much God, it's what God's created through the church. It's the institution, perhaps, of the church or other institutions. Some people place, I think, in our culture, since we've become more secular and we don't have a national identity religiously anymore, a lot of people put their faith and hope in politics and politicians, and they're sorely disappointed all the time, repeatedly, for good reason, because it's other human beings who are sinners. You see, where is our confidence? And that's the challenge. And Jeremiah says that the nation of Israel had to get it in the right place and put it in God, even against the odds. Because you see, there is a natural mathematical equation that we can make. It looks hopeless for Old Testament Judah, And it looked like a suicide mission to just place their confidence in God, because they didn't have as much might or resources as the people around them. But that's exactly what faith is. It isn't entirely rational. It is asking us to really bet on something that doesn't make a huge amount of sense in the natural world. But that's exactly where God likes to work. And that's exactly how God likes to work, is by showing his sufficiency and his power when we don't have any. Good picture of that is, do you remember in the Old Testament, in Elijah, and he's got the widow who is running out of food, and he says if she feeds him just a little bit, God's prophet, then there will continue to be enough miraculously day after day to feed her and her son. And it doesn't make any sense to give away what you have and for there to continually be enough. But I think that story there is a paradigm for us. That's exactly what placing our confidence and our faith in God does. It doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense. It might look pretty crazy, and it doesn't look proven to deliver results. But the irony of that is confidence in God does actually always work, because he's faithful to us. So the location needs to be placed in the right place. Is our faith and our confidence placed in God to start? And then it needs deep roots. Remain in me as I also remain in you. I am the vine and you are the branches. And if you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. Now, this is where we're really getting into the nub of it, of what it means to remain. Because a plant, a vine, whatever it is, it doesn't have a huge amount of external control over what happens once it's in the location. But Jesus is saying you have a little bit of control over whether you stay in that channel of faith to be able to keep growing it or not. You have a little bit of decision making in terms of if you're going to take the good stuff that you get from being connected to Jesus. You know, Jesus, as we thought about last week, he's giving this address as he's on the way to the cross. And he's not just saying, remain in me because I'm a good friend to have, although that's part of Jesus' ministry. He's also saying, remain in everything I've given you. The whole story of me coming and showing you what God is really like, giving you that example. Me coming and showing you that God is for you, and if God is for us, who can be against us? That his love for you, for the world, is so much that he wasn't willing to stand back and let us get on with the mess that we've made of it, but he's coming into it, into our reality and our experience, and he's loved you enough to do that, and indeed on the way to the cross, to die for you and in your place, that your sins might be forgiven. Remain in that identity and in that story, and your faith will continue to grow, and good things are going to keep flowering from your life. And it's easy to come out of that for any number of reasons. I think for a lot of us that can feel too good to be true, that the God of the whole universe from all eternity selected us to be the recipients of his outpouring of his love, that he has made us one of his branches, and that he's brought us into that life. That can be an enormous hurdle. And for some of you in growing in faith, maybe it's about retaking that first step and believing, he did do that for me. When Jesus is talking to his disciples there to remain in him, remain is the key for some of us. Not get into it in the first place and believe this. It's hearing him saying, I've already taken you into my life and into my family. And it's now about you putting one foot in front of the other and remaining in that faith and belief that not only has God loved you and died for you, but so powerful is that love that nothing is able to take you out of it. And then for others of us, maybe it's about seeing the different ways that having these deep roots in God can actually help us endure whatever it is that life brings us. Now, the picture in Jeremiah is of a plant or a vine that withers up because it doesn't have deep roots and it's in the desert and everything is stripped away from it. But the next kind of logical step is if we remain in Jesus' words, if we believe what he said to us, if we read and absorb his word, then we are going to grow. Then we're going to flourish, then our roots are going to sink, and we're going to be like the one that's planted by the water and it's continually nourished. For some of us, it's about not thrashing and striving so much, and having the rest and the repose to realize once again that God, through his word, is nourishing us, that he's doing a work in our spirit. But even more than that, remaining in God gives us immense resources, because just as that plant goes with deep roots down and is nourished by the water, it means that whether it is a drought that comes, or whether it is a flood, or whatever kind of seasons, that it's going to stay strong because of where it is and who its roots are in and how deep they are. There are any number of life systems, of philosophies that you can pick up, but Christ has lived and died and risen again, and he continues to live, and he's able to continue nourishing the faith that he's given us for all seasons. And, you know, if Christianity was a faith that worked sometimes, or worked in the good times, or as you can get some versions of it which are prosperity gospel based, and it's about God being able to give you stacks of money and health and a good life, and that's a horrible distortion, because the whole point of it is that it's about remaining regardless of what happens. It's about God giving us roots to handle the worst of life's crises, difficulties and storms, and even the unimaginably good being able to take place through that. The plant is able to, with good roots, is able to withstand some really bad winters, some really bad storms. And that's what he's saying, remain. He's not promising that the circumstances are always going to be favorable. In fact, he's hinting at the fact that the opposite is the case, despite the difficulty of the circumstances. And I think that's a helpful and a powerful word for us, because we all know what it is to go through times of drought, maybe feeling dry spiritually, or indeed just storms, difficulties, stuff that we feel unable to face and surmount. And Jesus promises, remember that connection that I've made with you, and I will take you through all of that, regardless of how bad they are, regardless of how difficult it gets, because you've placed your confidence in the Lord in the right place, and your roots have gone down over time. That is what is going to sustain you for anything that you face. More than that, the promise is that we'll continue to grow and see good things and fruit even through that, by having faith, by believing in God against the odds, by even when something lands across our door, whether it's a letter or news that we get, or difficult circumstances and headwinds coming, that even though it may look like and feel like, and lots of people ask this question, has God abandoned me? Is he giving up on me because the circumstances are getting more hard? No. He's giving the opportunity of faith to grow in us in a new kind of setting and situation, and in a much deeper way. In fact, it is quite often those battering storms that come at us in life that cause our roots to go down, and indeed that prove the depth of our faith, that allow it to work. It causes us to have faith rather than fear. You know, Jesus is going to sum all this teaching up by saying, do not fear, because I've loved you. And that's really the center of it all. This isn't a project or an experiment that God is involved in. This is something that he's motivated by because of the deep love that he has for you and me as his people. And he's challenging us and daring us even to, as Martin Luther said, see his willingness to work in our life, to come and be in our support and our strength, even though things seem insurmountable, if we're feeling like that in our lives. And you know, when I was thinking about having faith over fear, I was reminded of a football game quite a few weeks ago now, but when we were at the semi-finals, when St Mirren won the League Cup, they actually had a huge banner display at Hampden of faith over fear, because it was All Saints' Day that had happened, in a remarkable coincidence. And that was a story of faith over fear, because in the natural way of looking at it, they shouldn't probably have won that day, because Motherwell are brilliant, but they certainly shouldn't have beat Celtic 3-1 in the final. But they did. When you look at the club's resources, their budget, the giants that they were up against, none of it should have happened. But I mention that, and I do mention this serious point, not just because it's St Mirren, but because the manager got them to believe. And he spoke in the interview after about the fact, I got them all to believe with 100% confidence that they were able to go out there and do it today, and they didn't have any fear of Celtic or losing. It's enormously powerful. There are scientific studies that are done on people who end up hospitalized, and the fact that folks who have faith over time tend to trend with sometimes increased outcomes, certainly better mental and psychological outcomes, because they have faith and prayer, and it makes a valid and a measurable difference. And so God asks us, having planted us and given us that location of him as the confidence of our faith, to remain in it, to stay in it, to have faith in him and what he can do over fear. And lastly, and most briefly, the results. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. If you keep your confidence in the Lord and you let those roots go down, even through real difficulty of circumstances, good things are going to come. You're going to see good things happen, and other people are going to see good things happen in your life. Think about a vine. It doesn't exist for its own benefit. It does look beautiful when it's dressed and all of that. Produces grapes, produces products that people can enjoy, produces something that is of benefit way away from it itself. The Psalm 1 plant is like or in Jeremiah, it's something that has evergreen leaves, that there's something beautiful to admire and see about it all year round. Faith should produce results, and God asks us through faith to expect results. And results that maybe in the natural would look a bit audacious and ridiculous. But that's what God challenges us to do. So what is he challenging you and I to have faith for this year? I shared a little bit of news this morning about something that in the natural looked a bit ridiculous this in November towards the end of last year. But I think we all had a bit of faith, and God has rewarded that. And God loves to reward faith. Those letter of James, the New Testament says, those who come to God must believe that he is, and there he is the rewarder of those who seek him. God will reward your seeking him. I don't know how that is. That is for you and your relationship with God. But can I challenge you this year, and it's a loving and an encouraging challenge, to ask God for some big things. Whether those are big things that are your challenges that you're facing in your life, that God would not only take you through them, but that you would grow and flourish in them, and that you have the faith to believe, I think God is going to work and do good things through this situation. Challenge that God will continue to help us steward the growth that we have as a church and see good things and see more fruit. You know, I think what we're going to be celebrating new members joining us in a few weeks' time. And I always like to reiterate to you, we're doing this against the run of results. It's a bit like the St. Mirren story. The church nationally is in decline, and a lot of churches are really struggling, and we've known struggle, but that's the trend. If you look at the highest level graphs, but we're seeing life and growth. And I think some of that at least is attributed to the faith and the prayers of the people in this church over decades, who have wanted to see God and his people flourish, and have wanted to see people know and experience the love of God. And sometimes these prayers can take decades to materialize, but I think you and I get to live through something of the benefit of that. So how can you and I be these people in the church today that pray and expect in faith God to work? Because the national statistics on church life and numbers and growth, yes, they're real. But they're statistics, and God isn't governed by them. God actually is in a relationship with us where he causes us and asks us to put our confidence in him, whether that's for church growth, personal growth, help through our circumstances, life and healing in situations that we think are dead and hopeless. He asks us to have faith to see him work, and promises you will see fruit if you place your confidence in him. May God bless this word to us. Amen.